You never know. And they like hunting. They love blood sports. Oh my God, they're werewolves!
What immediately stands out in this episode is the excellent cinematography for as early on as the opening sequence. Filmed on location, this period piece looks amazing. Especially impressive is the initial fight sequence between the said quarterstaff bearing Scottish kung fu monks and the custodians of the Torchwood Manor. There was even a wire-based slow-motion flip sequence that looked particularly stunning. Even if it feels a little bit out of place, it sure looks cool, and I enjoy it. Also, man do I love that post-credit scene in the TARDIS with the Doctor and Rose where they listen to Ian Dury and the Blockheads. As an avid fan of the song Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, and indeed Ian and the band, I was overjoyed when it was referenced, and of course, included, in that scene. Added with the fact, and topped off with the reappearance of the TARDIS hammer, in which the Doctor hits the console in an attempt to keep everything running smoothly in time with the beat. All I can say is thank you for this RTD, as I absolutely love it, and I'm sure many others do also.
What do you think of this? Will it do?
Well, late 1970s, you'd be better off in a bin bag. Hold on, listen to this. Ian Dury and the Blockheads. #1 in 1979.
You're a punk.
It's good to be
That's what you are.
lunatic.
A big old punk with a bit of rockabilly thrown in.
Want to go see him?
How do you mean in concert?
What else is the TARDIS for? I can take you to the Battle of Trafalgar, First Anti-Gravity Olympics, Caesar crossing the Rubicon, or Ian Dury at the top rank, Sheffield, England, 21st November 1979. What do you think?
Sheffield it is?
Hold on tight.
As well as being an enjoyable episode, Tooth and Claw is also a very important one also. After the very weak New Earth the previous week, this episode finally gives us a real story to dig our heels into, a creepy werewolf story in an historical setting and centred around another historical figure, Queen Victoria. This story's version of Queen Victoria is based more in a modern day conception than the actual historical Queen. She doesn't possess the depth of character that Mark Gatiss and Simon Callow were able to bring to Charles Dickens in The Unquiet Dead, however. But Pauline Collins compensates for this with a multi-layered performance that mixes steely determination, wry wit and regal imperiousness, all of which it makes it possible to understand why she would effectively declare war on the man who saved her life. Derek Riddle and Jamie Sives are particularly good as Sir Robert and Captain Reynolds also, as their manner, speech and philosophies mark them as quintessential products of the Victorian age. Tooth and Claw feels like a sumptuous supernatural costume drama, one that just happens to have a pair of jackasses wandering right through it. Honestly, it's easy to see why the Doctor Who production team was so proud of this episode, so much so they would consider kicking off the season with this story instead of New Earth, and actually, I really wish they had. Nevertheless, Queen Victoria's decision to banish the Doctor and Rose from the British Empire felt a bit abrupt, especially when she does it immediately after knighting the duo. One could conclude that the motivation for the banishment came after her concern about the Doctor consorting with the stars and magic. It probably seemed unnatural to her, and she didn't want the Empire to have anything to do with it. Cleverly picking up on a thread placed during the Christmas Invasion episode, we finally find out about the origins of the Torchwood Institute. Here we have Russell laying down the seeds for another very interesting arc for the season, and man does it impress in both mystery and intriguing style. Tooth and Claw is arguably one of Davies' best scripts because it's remarkably straightforward. It's a runaround with some wonderful character work, a collection of tropes and cliches, seemingly pulled from everywhere in order to fashion a pulpy narrative framework for what amounts to a werewolf movie with ninja monks and Queen Victoria. It's a great high concept and Davies seems to have a great deal of fun with it. The plotting is straightforward and Davies does a great job making sure not to clutter the script. There's no need for an overly sympathetic villain here. When Rose, who is genre savvy at this point, offers to take it home, obviously assuming that it's shipwrecked and stranded, it refuses. Why would I leave this place? A world of industry, of workforce and warfare. I could turn it into such purpose. The monster doesn't even pretend to be sympathetic, taking some measure of pride in what it does to its victim. I carved out his soul and sat in his heart. The story also briefly touches on the events of the parting of the ways. Since Rose woke up in the TARDIS in that episode, it hasn't been clear how much she remembers of the experience. There is something of the wolf about you, the creature comments. Rose is somewhat flustered by the comment, I don't know what you mean. It's unclear whether or not she remembers having a time vortex stuck in her head. She does though clearly remember the events in Doomsday. I'll confess to be a little disappointed that the show never properly dealt with that, but it's hardly a massive missing link. Eurostin's direction is fantastic, and while the CGI werewolf isn't flawless, it's a fantastic effect for a BBC production of the time. Tooth and Claw has a genuine sense of horror, despite the fact that it is family entertainment, and there's a palpable sense that this isn't the fun runaround that Rose and the Tenth Doctor seem to think that it is. In a way, it feels like a bigger budget throwback to the Hammer horror aesthetic of the Hinchcliffe era, only with better production values than Hammer horror and that era itself. It also showcases Tennant a lot better than either of the two previous episodes. Tennant settled into the role remarkably quickly, and Tooth and Claw pretty much captures the Tenth Doctor perfectly. None of that weird no second chances malarkey, just to quote the Fifth Doctor, some skinny idiot ranting in my face about every single thing that happens to be in front of him. The Tenth Doctor is a perfect historical tourist, the kind of geek who gets a kick out of seeing all these familiar concepts and characters in motion. The Tenth Doctor in his purest form, a Doctor Who fan in his persona of the Doctor. He loves to travel, the plot devices, the celebrities, the cliches and the monsters. Indeed, this explains why Tennant is so perfectly cast. Eccleston had a much stronger start than Tennant, who isn't half bad. Tennant seems to be far more comfortable in the role, moving forward into the series. Even in Rose, it was difficult to imagine Eccleston staying more than 2 years in the TARDIS. By the time we've reached Tooth and Claw, it's clear we're going to have to pry Tennant out with a crowbar. Which brings us to a problem that was evident in New Earth, even before we got a glimpse of Tennant's dramatic strengths. The Tenth Doctor and Rose are smug. They're too smug. They're too comfortable. The term Time Lord seems to fit the aspects of the character that Rose brings to the fore, the sense of arrogance and the entitlement, which doesn't really play to Tennant's strengths at all. When Rose confesses to enjoying Ian Dury, the Doctor offers to take her to a concert in 1979. What else is a TARDIS for? To be fair, there's nothing wrong with that. After all, the TARDIS drops the Doctor and his companions into danger with enough frequency that they have clearly earned an occasional breather. But there's just something so smugly casual about that line and the way it's delivered. Again, it's clear that Davies intends this. He writes Rose and the Tenth Doctor as decidedly smugger and arrogant, as a way of foreshadowing their initial separation. Talking to Doctor Who magazine in 2006, head writer Rusty Davies says it's deliberate when that happens, and they do pay the price. In Tooth and Claw they set up the very thing itself, Torchwood, that separates them in the end. It's sort of their own fault. That doesn't make it any more annoying to watch, however. It's also nice to see the show making a stronger effort at a year-long story arc. Bad Wolf was a nice enough attempt on the first time round, but it felt a little convenient and simplistic at times that it stemmed into the final episodes backwards, rather than developing logically. Davies does take advantage of the time travel nature of the show for the first 3-year-long arcs, but the Torchwood arc arguably feels the most developed of these, seeing as it's more upfront with the audience. Davies clues us into what Torchwood is and what it's planning for fairly quickly after we first noted the word being dropped into scripts, but it feels a bit more shrewder than the approach with Bad Wolf or Mr. Saxon, which are really just words peppered throughout the season with any meaning or context. After all, Mr. Saxon is an anagram of Master Number 6. It's not as if the audience could piece that much together with the evidence provided. Explicitly showing the foundation of Torchwood is a nice way of demonstrating the Doctor's hubris here. We as the audience are actually aware of the consequences of his actions before he is. One thing I can't stand, however, is Rose's attempts to get the Queen Victoria to say, "We are not amused," which if anything borders on the irritating, but only because she is being facetious during a crisis when people are actually dying. It's not exactly the reaction a decent human being would have. It isn't gallows humour, it's just smugness. People are being savaged by a werewolf. Who cares? I've got a tenner riding on this. Her big fat grin as she patronisingly tells the Queen it isn't amusing at every opportunity does get wearingly pretty quickly. Where we see Rose at her best is when she confronts the host and breaks down the class barriers by forcing the mistress of the house to aid in their escape. But it's another case of Rose being poorly written, and sadly is only the first of many throughout the season. Overall, Tooth and Claw is a fantastic little gem, and an episode that at least acknowledges how annoying Rose and the Tenth Doctor can actually be, which is something, and it's a pretty damn fine blend of the classic historical monster and Base Under Siege templates, and if anything is an exciting little runaround. It's a fun, upbeat venture, and one of the strongest stories from a rocky second series. I give this episode an 8 out of 10, a very strong episode indeed, and one I always enjoy revisiting.